My sister humiliated me at our mom's birthday, until the chef walked straight to my table. My name is Emma Bennett, and the night my family invited me to my mother's 60th birthday dinner, my sister leaned over the table and whispered, "Let's hope you can actually afford to eat here." She honestly believed I was the struggling sister who still made coffee for minimum wage. She had no idea I owned the restaurant. She had no idea the chef walking toward our table worked for me. And she definitely had no idea that 5 minutes later, every person in that private dining room would look at me like they were meeting me for the very first time. If you enjoy stories about quiet success, family drama, and satisfying endings, subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're watching from. Now let me tell you how one birthday dinner changed everything. The restaurant was called Luminous. It occupied the 42nd floor of Hartman Tower, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city skyline. It was the kind of place people waited 3 months just to reserve a table. The kind of restaurant where a single entree cost more than most people spent on groceries for a week. I arrived wearing a simple black dress from Target and a pair of black flats I'd owned for almost 2 years. No designer handbag, no expensive jewelry, nothing that announced wealth. I've learned something over the years. Real money rarely needs to introduce itself. The moment I stepped through the entrance, I spotted my sister Caroline standing beside the hostess stand. She wore a shimmering, emerald cocktail dress with matching heels and enough diamonds around her neck to catch every light in the lobby. Her husband Derek stood beside her in a perfectly tailored navy suit. Everything about them said success, or at least the version of success they wanted everyone else to see. Caroline looked me up and down, then smiled. "Oh," she said, "you actually came. I told Mom I would. I wasn't sure." Her eyes drifted toward my dress. "I figured a place like this might make you uncomfortable." "I'll survive." She laughed softly. "I hope so." Then she leaned closer. "Let's also hope you can afford dinner." Her perfume smelled expensive. Her voice smelled even more expensive. "I know this place is way out of your league." She smiled sweetly. "But Derek insisted Mom deserved the very best." I simply smiled back. "It's her birthday." "Exactly." She linked her arm through Derek's and walked ahead. I followed without saying another word. The private dining room overlooked the entire city. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath soft golden lights. Candles flickered across a 12-person table. Everything had been prepared exactly as I'd requested earlier that afternoon. Mom sat proudly at the head of the table wearing a navy dress. Dad was already halfway through his first scotch. My brother James and his wife sat nearby. My Aunt Linda, my Uncle Tom, Caroline's in-laws, everyone who mattered in our family. "There she is," Mom said. She stood and hugged me. It was polite. Warm enough for appearances, not quite warm enough to linger. "We thought traffic swallowed you." "It almost did." "Well." She gestured toward the far end of the table. "We saved you a seat." The worst seat, furthest from her. Between my teenage nephew, glued to his phone, and an empty chair, Caroline naturally took the chair beside Mom. The place of honor. I sat down without saying a word. Caroline clapped her hands together. "We should definitely start with champagne." "The Dom Perignon?" Derek nodded. "The 2012. The best bottle you have." The server smiled. "Excellent choice." Within moments, an ice bucket appeared beside the table. The cork popped. Golden champagne filled each crystal flute. When the server reached me, Caroline lifted one finger. "Oh, my sister can just have water." She smiled apologetically. "Champagne is pretty expensive." The server hesitated, then looked at me. "I'll have champagne." I said it calmly. He nodded. "Of course." He filled my glass. Caroline's smile tightened almost invisibly. She lifted hers. "To Mom. 60 years of grace, and wisdom, and strength." Everyone toasted. The champagne was excellent, exactly as it should have been. The appetizers arrived. Fresh oysters, crab cakes, butternut squash soup finished with truffle oil. Caroline ordered almost everything herself, always choosing the most expensive options. "This place is incredible." She looked proudly around the room. "Derek found it. I heard it's owned by some young hospitality genius." Mom smiled. "It's beautiful." Caroline leaned toward me again. "Each appetizer is about $30. She lowered her voice. "So don't be shocked later. We're splitting the bill." I looked at her. "We are?" She nodded. "Well, Derek and I are covering most of it, but everyone should contribute something." She smiled again. I figured maybe $100 from you, if that's manageable. I picked up my champagne. It won't be a problem. She looked relieved. Good. Because honestly, I wasn't sure you could even afford to come tonight. Dinner continued with effortless luxury. Servers appeared and disappeared almost silently, replacing plates before anyone even noticed they were gone. Fresh bread arrived wrapped in linen. Imported butter from France. Olive oil that tasted almost sweet. Every detail had been carefully planned. Caroline loved every second of it. She loved being seen in places like this. Loved watching people admire her lifestyle. Loved making sure everyone understood just how successful she and Derek had become. She raised her wine glass. Can you believe this view? It feels like we're eating above the entire city. Derek smiled. That's exactly why I booked it. I wanted something unforgettable. Mom reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You two spoil me? You deserve it, Caroline said proudly. The main courses arrived. Perfectly cooked filet mignon, pan-seared salmon, duck confit. Every plate looked more like artwork than dinner. The servers described each dish as they placed it down. This is incredible, Aunt Linda whispered. I've never eaten anywhere this fancy. Caroline smiled proudly as though she'd personally cooked every meal. Derek only picks the best places. Across the table, everyone began talking about work. James had recently been promoted. His wife talked about remodeling their house. Aunt Linda described a luxury cruise she had just returned from. Everyone took turns listing accomplishments. Bonuses, vacations, promotions, expensive purchases. Eventually, James looked toward me. So, how's work? The question wasn't cruel, just dismissive, like asking someone whether their old car was still running. It's good. Still working at that little cafe? Caroline asked. I nodded. Yep. She smiled sympathetically. So you're still making coffee? I do. Assistant manager now? Something like that. She laughed. I honestly think that's kind of cute. Everyone looked toward her. I mean it. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Not everyone has to chase huge careers. Some people are happier with simple jobs. There isn't any shame in that. I smiled politely. No, there isn't. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Caroline. She looked at him innocently. What? I'm complimenting her. She turned back toward me. You've never really been ambitious. And that's okay. I think people should know their limits. Silence settled over the table. Mom quickly changed the subject. So, James, tell us about the promotion. Conversation moved on, just like it always had. For years, this had been my place inside the family. The quiet daughter, the ordinary one, the one nobody expected much from. It wasn't exactly cruelty. It was something harder to explain. They simply never imagined I could become anything extraordinary. After a while, you stop correcting people. You let them believe whatever makes them comfortable. Life gets quieter that way. Dessert arrived. Chocolat soufflé, crème brûlée topped with fresh berries, an artisan cheese board, coffee, espresso. Everything was served with perfect timing. Derek leaned back proudly. I think tonight ended up costing about $4,300. Aunt Linda's eyes widened. For one dinner? He grinned. It's Mom's 60th birthday. You only turn 60 once. Mom looked genuinely touched. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Caroline smiled. We just wanted tonight to be unforgettable. As the dessert plates disappeared, Caroline leaned toward me once more. So, about your $100? I looked at her. What about it? She lowered her voice. I know money can be tight. So if you need to split it into payments, Derek chuckled quietly beside her, you will understand. I looked directly into her eyes. It won't be necessary. She smiled. Good. Honestly, I wasn't even sure you could afford to sit at this table. She meant it as a joke. Only Derek heard it. He smirked into his coffee. I simply folded my napkin, took one sip of water, and looked toward the kitchen. Because right on schedule, the doors opened, and Chef Antonio Romano stepped into the dining room. The conversation around the table continued. Nobody noticed him. Not yet, but he wasn't looking at anyone else. He was walking directly toward me. Chef Antonio Romano crossed the dining room without hesitation. The conversations around our table slowly faded. People began watching him. Not because celebrities were unusual at Luminous, but because Antonio almost never left his kitchen. He reached our table, then smiled directly at me. "Good evening, Miss Bennett." His voice was warm and relaxed. "I wanted to personally make sure everything has been perfect tonight." Silence. Complete silence. I smiled back. "It has." "The salmon?" he asked. "Exactly the way you requested. It was perfect." "And the private dining room? Temperature comfortable? Lighting all right?" "Everything's perfect." He nodded with obvious satisfaction. "I'm glad. If you need absolutely anything tonight, please let me know. It's always an honor to have you here." He gave the slightest respectful nod, then quietly walked back toward the kitchen. No one at the table moved. Even my nephew had finally put his phone down. Caroline stared at me. "What was that?" I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "The chef." She blinked. "He knew your name. He came out here for you." I took another sip of water. "He usually checks on me." "Usually?" Dad repeated. "What do you mean, usually?" I placed my glass down carefully. "Because I own the restaurant." Nobody spoke. Mom looked as though she'd forgotten how to breathe. Caroline laughed. One short, nervous laugh. Very funny. "I'm serious." She kept staring. No, you're not. Luminous belongs to Bennett Hospitality Group." "It does. And Bennett Hospitality Group belongs to me." James frowned. "Wait. What?" "I bought Luminous 3 years ago," I answered calmly. "It's part of my restaurant group." Caroline shook her head. "No, that's impossible. This place is worth millions." "It is." She looked at Derek. "Tell her." Derek had already pulled out his phone. His fingers moved rapidly across the screen. His face changed with every second. Confusion, disbelief, then shock. "Oh," he whispered. "Oh my God." He slowly turned the screen toward Caroline. Everyone leaned closer. On the display was the official company website, Bennett Hospitality Group, founder and CEO. Emma Bennett. My professional photograph. My biography. 5 restaurant locations. Awards. Industry recognition. Estimated annual revenue. Nearly $15 million. Caroline looked back at me. "You own all of this?" "I do." She blinked again. "But you work at the cafe." "I own that too." "The little neighborhood cafe?" "Yes. I bought it 6 years ago. It was my first business." "And you still make coffee?" "I enjoy it. I work morning shifts when I can. It reminds me where I started." James leaned forward. "So, how many restaurants?" 5. Luminous. A French bistro. An Italian restaurant. A sushi restaurant. A farm-to-table restaurant. And the cafe. I also own the building the cafe is in." Dad stared at me. When did all this happen?" "Over the last 6 years." Aunt Linda looked genuinely confused. "But how?" "I saved every dollar I could," I said. "When I worked in corporate finance, I never increased my lifestyle. I kept driving an old car. I stayed in a tiny apartment. I invested instead. When I had enough money, I bought one struggling cafe. I worked 16-hour days. I learned every part of the business. When it became profitable, I bought another, and then another, and another. It wasn't glamorous. It was just consistent." Mom still hadn't spoken. Finally, almost whispering, she asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked around the table, then smiled sadly. "I tried. Everyone looked at me. I invited all of you to the opening of my second restaurant. You were busy. I called after buying Luminous. Mom, you congratulated me, and then spent 20 minutes talking about Caroline's promotion." Nobody interrupted. I stopped trying after that. It became easier to let everyone believe I was just the sister who made coffee. Caroline lowered her eyes. For the first time all evening, she had nothing to say. The silence around the table felt heavier than anything that had been said all evening. Even the city lights outside seemed distant. Nobody reached for their wine. Nobody touched dessert. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. $15 million. He looked at me carefully. "And all this time, we thought you were struggling." I smiled gently. "I know." He rubbed his forehead. "Last Christmas, I offered to lend you money. I remember. I honestly thought you couldn't pay your bills. I appreciated the offer. I really did. But I wasn't struggling. I just never corrected anyone. James shook his head slowly. So while we were talking about promotions, you were building an entire company, I suppose? You suppose? He laughed once in disbelief. Emma, you own more businesses than anyone I know. I shrugged. I've always liked building things. Across the table, Caroline finally spoke. Her voice barely came out. I've been horrible to you. Nobody answered. She looked directly at me. I made jokes. I embarrassed you. I treated you like you weren't successful enough. Yes, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften the truth either. You did. A tear rolled down her cheek. I'm sorry. I honestly believed. She stopped, then whispered, I thought I was better than you. I know. You never corrected me. I looked at her quietly. Would you have believed me? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. After a long moment, she looked down. No. Mom slowly reached across the table. Her hand rested over mine. I'm proud of you. Her voice trembled. So incredibly proud. I should have listened years ago. I should have asked questions. I should have cared enough to know what was happening in your life. I squeezed her hand gently. I wanted you to know. I really did. I just got tired of competing for your attention. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Oh, sweetheart, I never meant to make you feel invisible. I know, but intentions don't always become reality. At that exact moment, our server returned carrying the leather check presenter. The check, Mr. Thompson. He placed it beside Derek. Out of habit, Derek picked it up. He opened it, then stared. 4318? He swallowed. Wow. Before anyone could speak, I reached for my phone, typed one short message. Less than 10 seconds later, the server's tablet chimed. He looked down, then smiled. Oh. He turned toward Derek. The balance has already been taken care of. Everyone looked at me. I comped dinner. I slipped my phone back into my purse. Consider it my birthday gift to Mom. Caroline blinked. You can just do that? It's my restaurant. I smiled. So yes, I can. Almost on cue, Chef Antonio returned, this time carrying an elegant bottle wrapped in white linen. He placed it carefully beside my mother. Miss Bennett asked that we bring something special. He removed the cloth. The label became visible. 1982 Chateau Margaux, one of the most valuable bottles in the restaurant's cellar. Antonio poured a small tasting glass. My compliments, Mrs. Bennett. I hope your birthday has been memorable. Mom accepted the glass almost mechanically. Thank you, she whispered. After Antonio disappeared again, nobody spoke for several seconds. It felt like the entire evening had quietly turned upside down, not because I had become successful. I already was. The difference was that they finally saw it. No one rushed to leave after dinner. For the first time in years, our family wasn't pretending. Nobody was trying to impress anyone. The expensive restaurant, the designer clothes, the promotions, none of it seemed very important anymore. Dad looked at me across the table. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. He shook his head. I spent years worrying about you. I thought you had given up on your career. I thought you settled. I never once asked what you were actually building. I smiled. You weren't the only one. James laughed quietly. I can't believe this. He leaned back in his chair. So, you're basically a millionaire. I smiled. I've been fortunate. No. He shook his head again. You've worked unbelievably hard. Then he grinned. So, any chance you're hiring? The entire table laughed. Even Caroline. For the first time all night. It sounded genuine. I'll think about it. I smiled. But no special treatment. Fair enough. Caroline wiped her eyes. Emma, I really would like to have lunch. Just the two of us. No competition. No comparisons. I want to actually know you. She looked embarrassed. I don't think I've really known my own sister for years. I looked at her for several seconds, then nodded. I'd like that. She smiled through fresh tears. Thank you. Mom stood before everyone else. She walked around the table until she reached me, then wrapped her arms around me. This hug was different. Longer. Real. I missed so much, she whispered. I was looking at the wrong things. I hugged her back. You see me now. That's enough. She pulled away. No, it isn't. But it's where I have to start. We slowly left the private dining room together. Outside the elevators, Antonio was waiting. Miss Bennett. He smiled. I hope your mother enjoyed her birthday. She did. Thank you. My pleasure. He shook my hand. I'll see you tomorrow morning? Like always. He laughed. I'll have fresh pastries waiting. Dad frowned. Tomorrow? I nodded. I open the cafe every Thursday. You mean, you still work there? I do. Mom looked surprised. But why? Because I love it. I love talking to regular customers. I love making coffee. I love remembering where everything started. You built all of this, and you still choose to work behind the counter? Every successful business starts by serving people. I never wanted to forget that. Outside, the night air was cool. Everyone headed toward expensive luxury cars. BMW, Mercedes, Lexus. I walked toward my 6-year-old Honda. James laughed. You own 5 restaurants? And still drive that? It runs perfectly. I smiled. I've never seen a reason to replace it. He shook his head. I don't think I understand you. You don't have to. As I pulled out of the parking garage, my phone began buzzing, one message after another. Mom, I'm proud of you. Dad. Coffee this weekend? Just us? James. Seriously, about that job. Then, Caroline. Lunch next week? I want to start over. I looked at the messages for a moment, then smiled. For years, my family believed I was the unsuccessful daughter, the one who never fulfilled her potential, the sister who served coffee while everyone else built careers. The truth was, I had never needed their approval to build my life. I only wanted them to notice it. Tonight, for the first time, they finally had. Tomorrow morning, I'd unlock the front door of my little cafe before sunrise. I'd greet my regular customers. I'd make cappuccinos. I'd wipe tables. I'd laugh with people who had no idea who owned the place, because success had never been about impressing strangers or proving my sister wrong. It was about building a life I genuinely loved. Quietly, patiently, one cup of coffee at a time.